Chair.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Chair, well, it's good to hear a coherent explanation about the economy from the Green spokesman on finance, a former Green spokesman on finance, and actually he'll be a loss to the opposition because there's no one to take his place, whether it's Greens or Labor. I don't agree with his apocalyptic description of either the New Zealand environment or the New Zealand economy, but he does focus on the real issues. He does have a different point of view, but you can follow it and occasionally be influenced by it, which puts him in a vastly different class than Grant Robertson. That is for sure. The man who is now campaigning for surpluses in between turning up at protest marches outside government departments protesting against constraint. So out on the street he's against constraint, and when he comes in here he's lecturing the national government about how we haven't shown enough constraint. Haven't shown enough constraint. So I look forward to hearing from the opposition parties about which programs they think should be cut to generate a larger surplus number. That's the bit I want to hear. That's the bit I want to hear. I suspect I might not. But, Mr Speaker, we have heard a couple of versions of what's going on in the economy which amount to the economy that the Labor and the Greens wish they were criticising. But, Mr Speaker, one of the features of the current growth rates, or two features that stand out. One is the breadth of the base of growth. In fact, when the members talk about commodity prices, what they should be referring to is the way in which the New Zealand economy is showing broad and sustainable growth at a time when the dairy prices are low. That is actually the interesting issue. The question people should be asking themselves is, if dairy was so dominant, why is it that we're looking at growth of 2.5% to 3% over the next 3 to 4 years while dairy prices are low? Well, the reason, Mr Speaker, is because a lot of other industries are doing well, even export industries. One should just look at the trade-weighted index, which is a measure of the sales of our exports in the currencies that are relevant to those sales. And what is rather surprising in the light of the drop in dairy prices is that trade-weighted index has stayed relatively strong. And, Mr Speaker, that's in a context where we have a number of features of the economy that indicate the kind of sustainable growth which will deliver moderate but consistent wage increases to our households. And New Zealand households, I think, with the experience of the last few years, have learnt that simple solutions to the problems of the challenge of rising living standards probably aren't viable. And the most simplistic is the one the Labor Party suggests as the answer to every single problem, and that is tax deductibility of R&D. That is the answer to everything. Well, Mr Speaker, it's not the answer to everything. As the government has set out in its business growth agenda, there's about 300 answers to the question of what needs to be done to support investment by businesses that enables them to employ another person and to grow their business, because that's what growth is. And, Mr Speaker, it is all set out in the business growth agenda. This debate is actually about the fiscal results to the 30th of June 2014. And, Mr Speaker, that year, which now seems somewhat distant, prior to the election, showed significant advance in the government's books, where the deficit peaked at about 18 billion, and I think for the year ended 30th of June 2014, the deficit was around 2.5 billion. And, Mr Speaker, I'll simply reiterate what was said earlier in question time. The government's approach to fiscal management is pretty straightforward. What works for the community works for the government's books. When we solve a problem in our community and in our families, we reduce pressure on the government budget. And I know it's an approach that confuses the opposition parties. To some extent, it confuses the media, who think that any government gets fiscal control by cutting everything. The key to smaller government's better government. When we do a better job, as these accounts indicate we are, and certainly the budget will indicate, further intensive focus of the government on doing a better job That is how we get back to surpluses and get debt repaid.
Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. As members opposite